Hello, everybody. Today we're going to dive into the Spanish variation of the four knights, which is starting with e4. White is fighting for the center with the king's pawn. We're replying with the same with e5. Knight f3, challenging the pawn on e5. We are defending. Here, knight c3 is played, also normal developing move. We're playing knight f6, putting some pressure on e4 square. At the same time, also helping potentially for the d5 break with our knight. One of the, basically the only good choice in this position. And here we get the four knights opening, and at this moment white has a few options, very decent ones. And the one we're looking at in today's chapter is bishop to b5. So, first of all, the idea of this move is to develop the bishop, but to the b5 square, not to the c4, like in the other line we have already in the other chapters. But bishop b5 definitely is not running into the trick of knight e4, so there are many good things about it. Also, bishop can always take the knight on c6, and it's also putting more pressure on the pawn on e5. That's why we have to always be ready for any bishop take on c6. In this position, there are quite some moves for black. There is bishop c5, bishop b4, knight d4, one of the main lines. And even though all these moves are well studied and they're good, we're going for another move. We're going for bishop d6. The main idea and difference between these moves, even though it looks pretty much awkward putting the bishop in front of the pawn on the d file, so that the bishop from c8 has some difficulties to get out. Well, first of all, this variation is a bit more rare than the others. Comparing to some other lines, which are going to probably be pretty much forcing, and very early on we are going to get some even positions and variations which can easily be equalized, and we're getting to the draw, like variation with knight coming to d4 and so on. But with bishop on d6, we have this move as a threat later, since we're defending the pawn on e5. So the main idea is that we develop the pawn, we defend the pawn on e5, we develop the bishop, we are ready to castle. Well, and in case white is taking on c6, then our bishop is going to play. If not, we're going to see which plan we are using, but we're going to improve the bishop from the c8 square. So, to my opinion, bishop d6 looks like the most promising option, the most ambitious one, and the one which is after which the game is going to be more interesting and not too dry. So let's start and see which options white has here. Of course, there are quite some moves depending what white wants to do. We're going to start with with a more like dubious kind of moves. But of course, just generally speaking, there are moves like d3, a3, okay, immediately castle, moves like g4, for example. Okay, let me just remove it for a moment. Yeah, moves like the g4. Also, we have, of course, we have the bishop take on c6, and we have d4. So these are the moves which are possible in this position. Some of them are very good, some of them are not so good. So let's start with g4. So what happens in case of g4? White is basically saying white wants to attack on the king side, which doesn't make any sense since we haven't even castled short yet. But okay, generally on g4 move, we must, in most of the cases, try to react in dynamic way, because g4 is a dynamic move and we have to react. So in this particular case, we're going for knight d4. It's actually not really in this particular case because it's a typical reaction on the g4 move. We're going to see it also in the other lines. So bishop moves away. We take the pawn on g4 now. And after knight takes, we have queen h4, intermezzo, attacking, threatening checkmate on f2. And after queen f3, we take, and we are just up a pawn, having great position. In case rook g1 is played, immediately attacking the knight and the pawn, we're bringing the queen to f6. That's why this knight on d4 is so important. This first move, knight d4, because now we're attacking the knight on f3, and also we're pinning it to f2, so knight d4 is not possible due to the checkmate on f2, and in case white is taking on g4, we're going to grab the knight on f3. So bishop e2 trying to defend the knight on f3, but we're taking anyway. Bishop takes, and knight h2, we're grabbing even another pawn and threatening to take the bishop on f3. And here, after bishop comes back to e2, we're playing just h5. In the next move, we want to bring the knight back to g4 square. Even if we're losing a pawn, it's fine, because we're opening up the h file for the rook later. And we're having, white is going to have big problems because of the f2 pawn. We might play something like bishop c5 and develop the other bishop. So we're getting a great position for sure, clearly better for black. In case of g5, so white is just continuing their plan. Then we have time to take the bishop on b5. So that's why we take, in case knight retakes, and we take the pawn on e4. That was the main idea, that the pawn is hanging on e4 after we grab the bishop on b5. d3, attacking our knight. Then we are playing the same move, attacking the knight. So the idea is, of course, if knight goes back, then we can take it, because there is not a good square back for the knight. And if knight takes on d6, then we can take with the knight. So in this case, knight d6, and if after knight e5, we have knight f5. Very nice square for the knight, since the pawn moved to g5. Great position. Again, we are not forced to castle short to create some opportunities for white, but definitely we achieved a lot here, and yeah, definitely white is in kind of a trouble, since white cannot castle short any longer due to all the weaknesses, and yeah, castling long. Then we can also still start some attacking the pawns on the king side. Let's see what happens in case of g takes f6. White is grabbing another knight. Then we're taking on c3 with a tempo on the queen. fg7. White is not looking at it because they can promote to a queen. Rook g8 is forced, dc, and rook g7. Basically, we're traded a few pieces, gained the bishop pair advantage. We have the g file as well, so slightly better position for black for sure, and white didn't achieve anything with this move, so that's why it's pretty dubious so early on. But generally, this g4 we shouldn't forget, because then generally g4 is an idea. Okay, let's go with the next move, d4. So the idea of d4 is to, generally white wants to go for d4, and black wants at some moments go for d5. And white sees that white can go for it instantly, which is not really a perfect time here, because if we look just our previous move, bishop to d6, we were discussing, even though this move is actually great, in the long term it's a great move, but in short term we can see that the bishop is located not on the good square on d6, and d4 move is helping us because we are happily taking on d4, opening up our bishop from d6. So now it's not so awkward any longer. And after knight takes, queen takes, trading some pieces. Now already bishop is queen e7 is a move. In the next move, we are ready to place the bishop on c5 or on e5, targeting the queen. We're also attacking the pawn on e4. And then later we can develop also the bishop from the c8 square. So in case of f4, white is trying to say, okay, we have a nice center. We go for c6, targeting the bishop, asking bishop where does it go? Will it be closed on the queen side, or it will go to the king side? So bishop e2 looks logical due to all this problems on the e file, all this pressure on the king. Now bishop c5, super important move. We're cutting the way for the king to castle, and also targeting the queen in the meantime. So queen has to go back. In case of queen d3, we have d5. We are immediately breaking the center using the fact that king is still there. In case of e5, which looks logical, white is trying to keep everything close. Then we have knight g4, with already some massive threats into the position. Bishop g4, and now queen h4 check. We include this check, because after queen g3 we can trade the queens and play bishop g4, and position is already clearly better due to these beautiful bishops of black, and also some issues with a pawn chain for white. In case pawn takes on d5, it is just helping us because it's opening the situation on the e file, and then we're playing g6. We are ready to go develop our bishop to f5, targeting the queen, and then we will see where we are going to castle in the next move. We might castle long, might castle short. It's going to depend. But yeah, definitely white is in trouble due to the king problems, and we're clearly better. If queen goes to e5, offering a traitor queen, well, we're not against, because now we're compromising the pawn structure of white. Now there is a double pawn in the center. And now we go for knight g8. These pawns are going to be weaknesses long term. So we're getting into the good endgame for us. Castle. Castle is possible. Here, of course, the thing is that we can go for c6 immediately, and after bishop e2 we castle, with the ideas again to push forward either with b5, b4 on the queen side, or we can also, okay, of course, rook e8 is a nice move targeting the pawn on e4, bishop bringing the bishop to e5, to c5 also possible. And right now it feels like that e4 is going to be rather a weakness, but generally we will definitely also have some pawn breaks with the d5, which probably could be unnecessary. So for now, our plan is just to put more pressure on the pawn on e5, and then decide. We're going to decide where will we go with the bishop. We can go for bishop e5, play d6 and develop the bishop, or we can remove bishop back, and we can sometimes even go for d5. Bishop g5 pinning, and at the same time developing the piece. Of course, now there is no real threat on e4. Okay, and here we are going for one of our ideas. First of all, defending the knight on f6 and attacking the queen on d4. This is a perfect square for the bishop, for now at least. So bishop queen goes back to d2. And now a very interesting move, queen b4. So queen b4 targeting on b2, also pinning, also removing the queen from the pin, attacking the pawn on e4. So there are many ideas with this connected with this move, which is interesting. The other move which we're going for is bishop c3. We're trading. So if you don't want to trade, then you can go for this bishop b4 interesting idea. So queen c3. Unfortunately, it's not really working out because we have this nice move, removing the knight from the pin, letting white take the queen, because if white takes, we grab it. Pawn has to take because otherwise the knight is gone. The bishop is gone. Then pawn takes and queen e7, and we're getting absolutely winning endgame. So here bc3 has to happen. And here we can play knight e4, but it's just going to be not so good, because after bishop takes, knight takes, bishop goes back, we bring back the bishop, bring back the knight, sorry, but white has such a strong bishop pair, so it's actually not clear what is happening in this position. Even though we are up a pawn, white is up in development, and yeah, we're definitely having some issues, so it's not really working out so well. Queen e4, on the other hand, is possible. If you, we are going to see this line. If you find this line risky, you can also go for h6 here. Or you can also go in this position for queen b4. It's another suggestion. So it just depends how you see this line for yourself. If it's too much, you can also go just h6 and continue the play. So queen e4, let's see. So first of all, the question is what white can do, how white can stop the check. And the problem for white is that there could be real problems. For example, if bishop comes to e2, then we're going to put more pressure on the bishop, and also the problem is that the g2 pawn is hanging. The g2 pawn is hanging. Bishop was also very active on b5. Removing it back doesn't make sense. If queen goes to e2, then we can go for this endgame, similar endgame what we were discussing, but at the end there is going to be also this knight e4 move, attacking the bishop, attacking the pawn, so it might not really work out well for white. So king f1, which is also not only just removing the castle from the king, but also it's a strong move because it's introducing rook e1 idea. We castle, we have to stop it. But all right, actually we don't have to castle, sorry. So here the point is that if we don't want to risk, if we're not sure, we are castling and we're getting into drawish position, because after bishop takes queen f5 we play, double attacking both bishops. Bishop g7, we're taking one with a check, and the other bishop we take with the king. So basically now we're up a piece, but white is forced to make a draw here. And that's how the game finishes, by the repetition. So now queen e5 is it looks very risky, but it's actually working out, this move. So first of all, it's a double attack on both bishops. What white can do? Okay, first of all, there is this rook e1 move, which is asking immediate question. So let's first start with it. Rook e1. Then we have the only move, of course, knight e4. We're breaking the pin, and also we're again threatening take on b5 or take on g5. Queen g3, white is putting more and more pressure on the knight on e4. Here, of course, since we always have some piece hanging, we can castle and threaten to take on g5 in case white is taking on e4. So that's why it's not really bad for black here, because in the next move we either going to defend the knight on e4, or we are going to take the bishop g5. So for example, if bishop goes away, we also have rook e8, d5, the knight will be defended, and we will not have problems. So bishop d3, another move, so removing this bishop from the attack, so it's not attacked any longer. Bishop on g5 is defended. Also, this bishop is looking onto the king side, which makes a lot of sense. And now, really, this rook e1 is a huge threat, so definitely we have to do something, and we castle. Now we castle, and now rook e1 is not bringing anything, because after rook e1 we have just queen d6, just removing the queen. The point in this endgame is that white is having two bishops. So this is kind of a compensation for our extra pawn which we have. But definitely our next plan for the next move is to try to finish the development, developing the bishop from c8. There are no real weaknesses on the king, so it's not clear how, if white wants to start some attack, how white is going to fulfill it, because our king is completely safe. There is not much there what white can do right now. Also, white has problems with its own king and rook on h1, so it's like double-edged, and there are similar problems for both sides. But definitely we have to be careful, because we have to redevelop the bishop as fast as possible. Other than that, long term, we have an advantage due to the extra pawn. That was the d4 move. So d4 move doesn't bring too much problems to us, again, because of it's opening up the bishop on d6. So the other move we're going to look for, it's also a move which is not really bringing too much problems, which is bishop c6. So it's very actually similar to the d4 move, because it's kind of helping us. It's a helping move. So here the question is with which pawn to take. Well, generally it would be good to take with a b pawn, because taking towards the center is good. But in this position, we're taking with the d pawn. The main point is that our bishop is on d6 and the other one is on c8, so now bishop is open. So kind of this move is helping us to develop our bishop in the next move, or in the next moves on g4. So if d3 is played, basically just developing move. White wants to develop bishop on g5. We're playing h6, blocking the idea of white going for bishop g5. And in the next move, we can develop the bishop to e6. In case white goes for the castle, so this means, okay, white committed to the castle already. And generally in this setup, throughout the chapter, we are going to see how white and black is kind of dancing before castling and playing many waiting moves before actually castling. So that's why castling too early is a bit wrong choice, but Okay, it can happen. So now we go for bishop g4. So white didn't stop it, so we went for bishop g4. And now the problem is that after h3, if we go back, it's not so easy to break the pin. There is no light squared bishop to put it on a2, and g4 is not working because after g4, knight g4, hg, and bishop g4, white is going to have big problems. Now this pin is basically unbreakable in the next moves. We're going to open the F file, castle, bring the rook there, targeting the knight. Also, queen can come and so on. So it's going to be big problem for white, and white is already much worse. So h3 is another move, but now h3 is interestingly is on the one hand it's stopping the bishop g4, but on the other hand now it's is becoming like a hook for our pawn coming to g4. So on the one hand, white stopped this idea of bishop g4. On the other hand, it's wide open for us some other opportunities. So we play bishop e6. We are developing. In case of the castle, we go queen e7, and we are ready to go for g5, g4 now, since the king is already castle and hook is there. If white is waiting, playing bishop e3, still waiting, not doing anything, we go queen e7 as well. We're also waiting. So this is what I was talking earlier about. Both sides are waiting. Who is going to castle first? Who is going to show weaknesses first? So we keep both opportunities in the position. Both castle are there, are possible. So queen e2, white is also saying maybe a castle long, maybe a castle short. So if we castle short here, the problem is after bishop takes a7, b6, d4 could be a very strong move. Now there are big threats taking on e5 and almost checkmate, but some queen entering on a6. So it's very difficult to play this because many times it feels like the pawn on a7 is actually poisoned one, but in this particular case it could be very interesting for white to go. So before castling long, we have to make sure that there is no problem with that. And now we're still kind of not sure where we're castling, so we can introduce another waiting move, which is knight d7. Generally, knight d7 is a good move because, okay, first of all, it's getting removed from all these g4, d5 hooks. Also, we are opening up a way to the pawn on f file. At the same time, we are ready always to jump with the knight to c5 at some moment. Like, it's going to depend where knight goes. For example, if white is going with a break on d4, then we are taking and we can play for knight c5. So that's why this move is very useful. Now let's see what happens in case white is waiting more waiting. So a3 is another waiting move, but now it's kind of clear that we're going to have hook at any side of the board in case white is castling, doesn't matter where. Short side, a long side, that there is going to be for sure an issue due to either g5, g4 on the king side or b5, b4 on the queen side. So in this position, we are already we are going for a6. So we kind of may say that maybe for white is a bit safer to castle short side because long side it feels like it's not really going to be possible anymore. If white is going knight d2, another waiting move similar to us, then we can see that okay, everything looks like white is going to castle short, removing the knight from f3 as well. So we castle long, and now white cannot castle long like us. Now, if white wants to keep the king on the same board, they cannot do it, so they have to go opposite side. That's our main idea, that the other king goes to the opposite side, and then we can start attack on the opposite side of the board. So if castle happens, I would like you to stop the video and try to find the best move here for black. It's very nice that everything is working out here because bishop a3 tactics works. Bishop a3, and basically we're just going to, after take, queen takes. We're going to take the knight. So this move is actually winning a pawn because white cannot really even take it. So that's why castling quickly is also not possible. Let's see what happens if castle immediately happens. Because again, now this bishop a3 move is not working because pawn takes and king d2, defending the knight. So it's not working. And here we go for b5 already. Now we are fully ready for this hook, and we are going to castle short. Even though for time being king can stay in the center, later we can castle short. But now b4 is a huge threat, trying to open up the king. We're going to have attacks on the both sides. We will attack on the queen side, white will try to attack on the king side. So it's going to be very dynamic and nice position and very fighting game. 1 second. Okay, we checked everything here. So that was a d3 move. In case of d4, white is going very interestingly, first taking on c6, and then going for d4. So it's very, very interesting. The main idea is, of course, going for d4 because it's always good. I mean, not always good, but it is always an idea for white and always an idea for black. And the thing here is taking on d7, d4 would be great, as well as bringing the knight to d7 would be also great. But we have another move, even better, which is bishop b4. The point here is that we want to have two hanging pawns. We're counterattacking on e4, and also we're attacking on d4. So there are now two problems for white, and white has to think what to do. If white is just castling, then we take on d4. Castling is very logical because the pawn is defended on d4. Then knight takes. Now we take the knight on c3, pawn takes, and we play c5. Attacking the knight. Also, generally, it's good because later we can play b6 and create a nice pawn structure that everything is defended. So knight b3. Now we trade the queens and we play b6. So now we're going to have 4 against 3 on the queen side with some weak pawns for white, and white is going to have 4 against 3. So position would be around equal. It's tough to say because this pawn is, we can say that is better than having a double pawns, but due to this pawn weaknesses on the queen side, I feel like that we have chances in this endgame. So so definitely a big fight for black and for white. So let's go back. Okay, bishop c6. We kind of we covered. Now we're going for the other option. Sorry, let me remove, yeah, bishop c6 we covered. Now we're going for the other option, castle. First of all, this is not dangerous at all. Of course, like why didn't play h3 so that we can go immediately for the hook. But castling so fast, it shows your card, so to say, that, okay, you castle short. So if we want, we can immediately reply with the castle short, and just both sides will not be able to attack because we castled same side. So castling short is absolutely fine. We're just going for it. In case white strikes immediately in center with d5, we grab it, knight takes, trading everything, rook e8. Now we're putting pressure on e4 pawn, rook e1, bishop e5, queen d3. Now c6, very topical idea, c6, because now bishop is already not on d6. Bishop a4 and queen c7, trying to stop any kind of f4 moves. And here h3, white is, of course, also h2 was under attack, but it was like more a side threat. And here we go for b5, bishop b3, a5, a4, and b4. And the problem is that after knight d1, there is d5, and we are opening up everything. We managed to break with a d pawn. We're having more space advantage on the queen side, and some big problems, by the way, now white is facing, because taking on d4 would be a huge problem due to the bishop coming to h2 with a check and attacking the rook at the same time. So yeah, going to be some problems. And actually it's very interesting line, so maybe just briefly going to show. So in case of take, bishop h2, it feels like king is defending the rook, but there is another problem, bishop coming to a6. So it feels like from all sides of the board, even though we're not going to win material, we're going to make the white's pieces more and more more and more awkward, because we can see that almost all pieces are standing on the back rank. So great great line for black. So d4 is not really a good move, and generally a d4 is not so good in this variation. I mean, so early on. Of course, d4 will be possible at some moment. Rook e1, white is trying to be solid, but definitely white most likely is going to transpose, because sooner or later d3 will have to be played. So after rook e1, d3, h6, we're just going to transpose. So that's why let's go immediately with d3 move order. So yeah, white castled first, so committed to castling short. Now playing d3, threatening the bishop coming to g5. And before us starting to remaneuver our position, because of course it's not ideal that we have bishop on d6 and we want to develop bishop on c8, but before start remaneuvering our pieces, we have to address the threat, because bishop g5 is indeed coming. And we are doing it by playing h6. Now we're not afraid to play h6, because there is no real problem on the king side due to the castled king already. We could be worried that sometimes when we play h6 that there is going to be g4, g5, but now we shouldn't worry about this because white castled. So bishop c4, coming back, also controlling the d5 square, but now we have knight a5, very nice move. So it's not really so good for white. Bishop comes to a3, developing move. It's most likely also going to transpose to the line 7th move a3. So we're going to look at the line, but let's see what may happen. And our typical idea, typical plan in this position is to play rook e8, defend the pawn on e5, bring the bishop to f8, and then we can play d6 or d5. It depends what we're going to do. And then we can develop the bishop and so on. So we're going for this plan. So rook e8, as we said, rook e8, defending the pawn first of all, because always this bishop c6 is also a threat. Let's not forget. Knight is defending the pawn, but bishop c6 can be always played. So now a3, very important, because many times in the line, it's very useful to have bishop on a2, the square for bishop to hide. Bishop f8, coming back. So now already we are ready to go with not only with d6, but also with d5. So that's why white has to be also very careful and watch out for the d5 move. So that's why in this position, very interestingly, okay, white can start with, for example, let's start with bishop c4, which would control the d5 square immediately. So here, of course, knight a5 doesn't make any sense because bishop goes back to a2. So d6, we are following the plan. And after h3, bishop e6, we're just going to transpose to the line with a3 included, so it's not an independent line. But knight d5 is interesting. So in this position, we had some games already here, and white continued with a d6 move, which is actually not the best. Because after d6, it's kind of a too slow reaction on move as knight d5. Because in the next move, white is going to play c4, and then we're going to have huge trouble having the knight on d5. So that's why very important to react instantly on this move. And in this case, we're just taking, so that e pawn is taking on d5. So that not c4, cd, but we have here ed. And now we go for knight e7. Of course, we have to remove with the knight back, targeting the pawn. In case of c4, which is logically defending it, we have a very nice strike, c6, attacking the bishop and attacking the pawn at the same time. In case of bishop a5, we have already knight f5, and we have great position because we're targeting the pawn on d5, where we can continue later. Okay, we have to be really careful because of this bishop, but we can continue later with pushing the pawn. But for now, there are also some threats in the position for white. Since the pawn on e4 disappeared, knight f5 became possible. Position is better for black. that's a critical line because after moving the knight back to e7, the e5 pawn is hanging. But we're just trading it for the d5 pawn. And trade is not so bad because trading the d5 pawn for the e5 pawn, it doesn't feel so bad for black. Is opposite. It's actually very good because at the same time we target the bishop on e3. Now it's kind of a problem. So if queen comes to h5 with the main idea of defending the knight and threatening queen takes on f7, we have to go for g6. Luckily, the pawn is defended on h6 by our beautiful bishop. And actually, it's important because this is the only move which is still keeping an advantage for us. Knight g6 feels like white can go into this line and just sacrifice a knight since the knight on d5 is hanging. But here we have intermezzo knight f6 attacking the queen. Queen has to go away. Now we go d5, another intermezzo attacking the queen. Now queen again has to go away. Now finally we're taking the knight. And after bishop takes e8, knight takes. Of course, we don't take with the queen. We don't give up our knight, but we take with the knight. We took two pieces for the rook, which is just great. We're ahead in material. And, well, even though our position looks passive, our pieces are ready to go into the game, and there is no stress from white. So the position is great. We're going to have decent chances in the endgame to win it. What happens in case of d4? Well, then we go for c6. We're attacking the bishop. We're most likely going to go for the d6 after that. We can consider taking the bishop, but it's opening up this f file, so we have to be careful because of it. So not only just blindly getting the bishop pair advantage, but we have to be careful for all this action. So most likely first playing d6, attacking the knight on d5, and then we would take on e3. But it's also all going to depend, because again, f7 is going to weaken so much. Knight f7 is another interesting option. But the problem is that, okay, if we would take here, then we would get problems because queen is coming immediately, bishop c4, and so on and so on. So we're getting problems. But after queen f6, it actually appears the knight is trapped on f7, so there are no issues for the black's king, and we're just ready to grab the knight. So it's pretty funny. Okay, so now we're going for the other option for white. So we looked at bishop e3, which is normal developing move. Let's start with a3 because there are more lines and some lines which we're looking at transposed here. So a3 is definitely a move. Main idea is to remove bishop to c4. First of all, controlling d5, also putting pressure on f7 in some lines, and generally bishop is already here. Since it's not bringing any threat, it's better on c4. And of course, there is no this knight e4 trick any longer for a long time, actually. But yeah, it's important it's not possible. So rook e7, rook e8, we are continuing with our plan of defending on e5, bringing the bishop back, pushing the d pawn. So now white is going for, in case white goes for a3, trying to stop potentially our knight with a knight jump to g4, let's say after bishop e3, and generally that there is no bishop g4 later. Then the point is that here, after our bishop f8, most likely we're going to go to the main line after the bishop comes to the c4. And in case here bishop goes immediately to c4, then we're having bishop f8 immediately coming back, following our main plan. In case of rook e1, then we have d6, of course, because d5 is not really happening. So after d6, h3, bishop comes to e6. Now we're offering a trade to the bishop on c4. And, well, this is also always a very good question with which piece to take. And generally, I'm going to repeat it many times. So particularly in this position, we see that white is ready to go with a knight to d5 very quickly and push for d5. That's why we can see that in case this knight d5, c4, or d4 is happening very quickly, then it's better for us to take with a pawn. if the knight would not be on c3, let's say on e2 or somewhere, and it's not going to be so easy for white to go for it, and we could be faster with the d5 ourselves, then we could take with the rook. So generally taking with the rook is better, but in this case we cannot due to all this activity from white playing knight e5, c4, d5. So that's why we take with the f pawn. In case of a3, which is very logical, stopping all kinds of knight jump, bishop jump later in the game, we're going for d6. So now basically we cannot go again for d5, so we go for d6, just calm move, and in the next move we're already to play bishop e3. So rook e1 is very normal move. Again, controlling the pawn on e4, defending it. At some moment that d4 can happen. We're going for bishop e6. In case of knight d5, then we have knight d7. The main idea that we don't want to allow this trade. I mean, we won't trade, but differently. Because the problem is that we couldn't take on d5 because of always white would take with a pawn. There would be the problem of the fork. So our threat is to go knight e7. We couldn't go knight e7 here because white would spoil the pawn structure. So now knight e7 is possible, attacking the knight, and then later we can also play c6 and kick the knight out of d5 or trade it. So bishop e6, again we have we have the rule which we follow, but in this particular case, let's start looking with the rook takes on e6. So in case rook takes on e6, then immediately white has knight d5, immediately taking the square, and after knight e7, rook f6, c4, controlling the d5 which we wanted to push so much. And now white is ready to go for d4 themselves. So that's why it's not so good, and that's why we have to go for f takes e6. Is much stronger here, since after white goes themselves for d4, we take, we grab it, queen takes, and now we go knight d7. Basically, the next move we can continue with d6, breaking with d5. Also, e5 is possible. So all these moves are possible, definitely. And now we are the ones who is striking in the center. We're not going to have any problems. So that's why... That was rook e1. Yes, here, rook e1. So knight h2. Basically, white is saying they don't want to go for d4. And we cannot go d5 ourselves. So now white is introducing another plan, which is including f4 break, trying to attack our pawn chain from the king side. Well, here we cannot really do much right now, but we have to go with a bishop to e6. We continue our plan. First of all, we threaten to trade the bishops. We also threaten to push for d5, so many threats. White has to react. If white is moving the bishop back to b5, then we're playing a6, take, and after f4, we take it, bishop e4, and now we're ready finally with the d5. Also, the pawn is supporting d5. So taking on d5 would feel a little bit illogical because it would undouble black's pawn. So e5, white is gaining some space in the center and also not allowing this undoubling of the pawns. Now we go knight d7, putting pressure on the e5 pawn. In case of d4 happening, we will always have c5. We are ready to bring the rook to the b8, to the b file. Targeting the b2 square. This is all thanks to bishop taking on c6. This is all happening, and well, good position. We have definitely a counterplay here. Knight d5, immediately taking the square on d5. And here the thing is that we could also go like this with this knight d7, but in this case we are taking on d5, because here white would like to take with a bishop, but they cannot really take. I mean, they could have taken, but the main point of white is keeping the bishop pair here, and even though the pawn structure is so bad. And now we go knight e7, attacking the pawn on d5. Queen f3 is the only way to defend it. And now we go knight g6. So whole plan of f4 was already eliminated and stopped by us. The thing is that white's bishop on the c4 is a bit passive. Next move, if we want, we can also go for the c6, and we can go for the d5 later. That's our active plan. What we could try to do here. So bishop takes e6 is happening. Rook e6 again. Now looking at the position, now d4 is not really possible, and this whole plan of knight d5 and c4 or d4 is not really happening so quickly. So now we're going for rook e6. Now we're going for this d5, knight d5, very logical. But now we have knight e7. Now we have it. Now we're ready to go with c6 d5. Knight has to take, not to lose time. Rook takes, and white is trying to strike. In this case, with the f4. We grab on f4, knight g5, targeting our rook. Now we go back to e6, bishop takes, and now d5. So if we can go quickly for the d5, then we are definitely taking with the rook. It's more ambitious and it's better. The position, even though kind of equal, but it's still good position, and we showed that we are also the ones who can strike in the center. Knight g4, offering the trade of our knights. Then we are taking, queen takes, and now knight d4, putting the knight on the square due to the absence of the knight on f3. Generally, it's strange that white traded this knight, because we are actually happy, very happy to trade this knight since we win the battle over the d4 square. Now we also target to take the pawn on c2, so white is forced to defend it, and after c6 we have definitely, computer is saying equal position, but I would say it's already at least slightly better, because we have all planned in the pocket. We can go for the d5 break. We can also bring the rook to g6. We're going to see where the bishop is coming. Maybe it's later going to come out on the c5 square. So everything is possible. f4, white is sticking to the plan, striking not with the d4 but with f4. Now we can take, we cannot really allow this f5 move forward, so we have to take it. We got to do it. And now the question is what white can do. In case white is pushing forward, which is actually the best move, but of course it's white gave up a pawn now for a time being. We go back with the rook, since we don't want to allow any d5 forks. Rook f4 and g5, very strong move. So this is important to know, this one. The thing is, we're not really weakening our king, because after rook moves, we can grab the pawn. Rook e4, knight e4, knight e4, rook e4. And now c3, d5. And we're getting this position. Our bishop is very nice piece. It's going to defend our king if there is any problem. But generally, we're just up a piece in this endgame. Of course, we can say that due to this, some pawn push, we're a bit weaker on the king side, and there is some compensation for it. It's possible to say, but for now, white has to try to claim that there is any attack ongoing, because we don't see it yet. That was a d4 move. In case of bishop f4, just normal natural move, taking on f4, and of course like something like d4 could be played. Now it's important for us to react dynamically and go for d5. Not allowing any d5, e5 action, we're going instantly for break in the center. So now white has to take. There is no e5 here, because we're going just to take that. So white has to take, knight takes, queen takes. Well, and we got absolutely amazing position. Here we are ready to bring the rook to e8. Our pieces are very active. And in case you're looking at this pawn on c7 and wondering if white can take it, well, after knight d4, then there is going to be a big trouble for white, since they cannot really do much. And okay, there is an e2 square. There is a big problem on e2. We have super active pieces. We have rook, which is coming to c8, targeting this c2. There are simply too many things which are wrong with the position. Knight e2, knight g3 potentially. Also, it's not so clear where the bishop actually is going to run away. on which square, because on g3 it can be taken. So yeah, we have amazing position. Bishop comes to e3, normal developing move. Okay, again, if we go for something like knight a5, then bishop is just going back. It doesn't make sense. So we go with our normal plan, bringing the bishop out to e6, finishing development, offering a trade to the bishops. Case of knight d5 again. So these are the main two moves against the bishop is6. These are play knight d5 or take or trade the bishops. So in case knight goes to d5, then we're going to take it with a bishop again as in previous line. Pawn takes, knight e7, attacking the pawn, bishop b5, c6. We're trading it, and now we're ready to have very nice pawn structure. Of course, d5 would be bad because e5 is hanging. But after bishop a4, we have knight f to d5, bringing the knight there. Later, I mean, we can also go consider playing f5 ourselves, or we can consider it's going to depend what we want to achieve in the position. But yeah, definitely f5 is possible. Removing the king from this diagonal definitely would be one of the things we should do. And well, the both sides are going to have something to prove. White's going to try to prove they have a bishop here, and that's why they have advantage. And we're going to try to prove that we have a great center and a great pawn structure in the center. That was bishop takes on e6. So again, we know the rule already. You can try to guess with which piece we are taking here. You can pause the video and try to find out. Now I'm going to break it down. So again, if white can easily go for knight d5 and then c4 or d5 break, then we are not really ready for taking with the rook. And other than that, we're taking with the pawn. So here, again, if we take with the rook to a6, knight d5, and c5, d4 are problems. So here we grab with the pawn, and we're stopping all kind of actions, and we're not allowing it. d4, now we're taking, knight takes, knight takes. If bishop takes, we can play e5, and then c6. Again, this is coming, d5 is coming. And in case of queen d4, we can even start with the c6, and now again, e5, d5 are coming. So a very nice position for us, a very nice and flexible center. We have moving any pawn that we have, we can do it very easily and quickly. So that's great. So now we move to the knight e2 move. So the main idea of this move is to bring the knight to g3, because I mean there are some squares which could be potentially maybe weaknesses for black. Bringing the knight to f5. Also, it frees the square on c3 for the pawn, so white is ready to go c3, d4, and so on. But on the other hand, it's also not. It also means that knight d5 is not going to be threat any longer, which is kind of helping us, as we can say. So now we follow our standard plan, rook e8. In case bishop takes on c6, we take the pawn, knight g3. Knight wants to jump to f4. We go bishop f8, removing the bishop first, so there is no attack on f5 first, no tempo. b3 and now d6. So now d5 would be a bit too early, because we might have some problems. White isn't forced to take. We might have issues on the d5 on e5 square. So we go for d6 now, and after bishop b2, we play g6, trying to restrict the knight on g3. We will be able at some moment to push if we want to. We can also push c5. We're going to see. There are many ideas for black, but definitely pushing forward d5 could be an idea, or c5. But since the bishop is on b2, I would rather not do it just yet and see how white is continuing to play here. Knight g3 immediately, of course, also possible without taking on c6. Now we go bishop f8 according to the plan. If rook e1, that's going to prepare attack against the black's pawn on d5. But the problem is now that we since the bishop is still on c6, it's stopped on b5, sorry, and this rook is there, we cannot really go for this. So we have to do something, and now we go a6. And the point is, compared to the other position, there is no a3 or no c3 which has been played. Knows these moves have played. So now bishop is kind of in trouble, because after bishop a4, I would like you to stop the video and try to find the best move. Of course, it's b5, immediately challenging the bishop. Bishop goes all the way back, and now knight a5, we're going to get the bishop pair just like that. In case of bishop c4 immediately, well, then we know what we do. We just play knight a5, immediately targeting the bishop. Now we're going to take it, and we'll have the bishop pair advantage as well. If bishop takes on c6, then we're grabbing with the b pawn. Now, in this position, since we don't have a bishop on d6, but taking with d pawn would be also good. But taking with a b pawn is, I would say, more ambitious, because we're going to have the d pawn prepared for some d5 later. So taking with a b pawn definitely makes more sense. Also, there is no bishop on d6, so we can play d6 ourselves, or even d5. So it's not an issue. bc, b3 now. Bishop is ready to develop to b2. Now d6, bishop b2, and now c5. Now c5, we're fully blocked the d4 square. We can remaneuver our knight all the way to e6. That would be a perfect square in such pawn structure for the knight. We can also play g6 if we want to restrict the knight from g3. We're going to see, but of course, like, the position is very strange, because white can go for d4, we cannot yet go for d5. So we're just going to remaneuver and see how white is continuing and act accordingly. So very interesting fight is ahead. In case c3 is played, then we should know that white is trying to go for the d4. But of course, there is always this problem with the e4 square for white, because we're putting a lot of pressure on it. But okay, we go for a6 again. Since a3 move is not played, it means that the bishop goes away. It will have to go away to the c2 square. It will not stay here, because if bishop c4, we have d5 already. Knight a5 would be also great actually here, because bishop cannot really escape. But now d5 is just great, because it's coming with a big tempi. Pawn takes, knight takes, and rook e1, targeting our pawn on e5. And now we go knight f6 back. Now again, also this knight a4 could be a threat at some moment, even though we have to be careful about the e5 pawn. And again, this is the advantage of the move of a6, that the bishop currently is on c4. It cannot take our knight on c6. Bishop goes to b3, then we play queen d6. We're finishing the development with next move bishop e6, because we defended the pawn on e5 fully with the knight and the queen. Bishop a4 is another option. Okay, now bishop is going somewhere to the c2, so we go b5. So in case bishop goes to the c2 square, we have d5 break instantly. Pawn takes, queen takes, since there is no knight on c3, no knight which can target our queen. Rook e1, and now bishop b7. We are just having very nice development. We have probably more active pieces, I would say. And okay, potentially this 6-ray is pretty unpleasant on the king, and just great position and great chances. And due to the pawn on e4, of course, we have a space advantage in the center. So bishop b3, white is trying to keep the bishop on b3, then we go for d5 again. Similar ideas in the previous line, but now white is not forced to take, because bishop is not on c2 but on the b3, and queen goes to e2 now, putting some pressure on e5. Now we go for bishop b7. We are not afraid of take, because then we can easily take on e5. For now is defended. Rook e1. So if such kind of plays start to happen, if white is not taking on d5, we have to already be happy, because generally white has to take it. White wants to do it, but if white is not taking it, this means that we are doing pretty nicely. Now knight a4-5 with the attack on the bishop. Bishop has to go away. And now we go c5. We already put all our pawns forward on the 4th rank. We have a nice center, very beautiful pawns, very beautiful pawn structure. As next moves, we're ready to play queen c7, also defending on e5, bringing the rook out to the d8 square. So yeah, great position, and definitely some advantage for black. It was castle. A3, it's basically, it's most likely going to transpose, but it can also, I don't actually think there can be any independent line here because most likely it's transposing to after D3 and so on. A3 move is generally very good because it allows white to go for bishop c4 and bishop a2 in case we are attacking the bishop. So it's always good to try to keep for white bishop on this a2 to g8 diagonal. So here we are ready to react to it with a knight to d4. That's one of the main ideas why we played bishop d6 to defend the opponent in e5 and jump with a knight to d4 with a tempi on the bishop. So bishop c4 looks logical. Now we go for c6. Now one of our plans is to go with a bishop to c7 and push for b5. If castle happens, then we are ready to castle. So as we were discussing, if white is opting out for castle early, then we can react accordingly. Now d3, and now bishop c7. Here we don't even have to stop bishop g5 just yet, because it's not a big trouble in this kind of setup. So yeah, we have definitely good position, but okay, this line is transposing, we are going to see it. So d3, castle, and okay, again, it's all just transposing. So that was a3 move that we looked already. Sorry, castle we looked. So now we're going for the a3 move. Oh, sorry, d3 move. Sorry. We are going for d3 move, not a3 move, which is absolutely normal developing move, offering the bishop to get out from the c1. Also, then later after any a6 move, white can go with a bishop to c5 without any problem, to c4, sorry, without any problem on e4. But of course, there is still some problem since the bishop cannot escape just yet. Now we are castling. We are ready to castle quickly. Now, in case white is castling, we are just going to play h6, and we will transpose to the 6 move d3. Okay, and now let's start with g4 first. Okay, well, so g4 here is very interesting move because first, I mean, if we would play this in the real game, we would be a bit scared because we castled, white didn't castle, g4 is happening. Okay, what is happening after take? What is happening after rook g1 and so on? But as we were discussing in one of the previous lines, is that we have to react on this g4 move dynamically. And one of the most typical approaches to it is to play knight d4, attacking the bishop, attacking the knight on f3, not allowing this g5. So in case white takes on d4, we take knight e2, we have c5, now we're fixing our pawn structure. In case of a4, which is of course stopping all kinds of ideas of a3, b5, we are ready to take on g4 since now there is no real issues any longer because queen is not defending the pawn. And in case of g5, I would like you to stop the video and try to find the best move for black. So here we are just simply taking on e4. That's a very nice move. If we go for queen a5, which looks very interesting because it's attacking the king, attacking the bishop, feels like we're winning. But after queen d2, queen takes b5, g takes f6. And it's already a bit unclear, right? Because queen g5 is coming, rook g1 and so on, trying to put pressure on d7, so we have to be careful. So that's why knight e4 first. So we are giving our knight, but not on f6 square, but on e4. Pawn takes, and then queen a5. So queen a5, but in another move order, first giving up the knight and then taking the bishop. So, and like this, of course, then there is no open g file, there is nothing there. Okay, so that was knight d4. In case bishop goes back to c4, then we have very nice move, bishop b4. And our main idea is that we are introducing the threat of the d5 in the position as a reaction to this pawn push in this on the king side. In case of g5, I would like you to stop the video and try to find the best move for black. Well, I think I already mentioned this move, so it's not so probably not so difficult. We're going for d5. We're attacking the bishop on c4. We're ready to develop bishop to g4. And of course, while white wants to take our knight, we want to take white's bishop. If g takes f6 happens, we're taking it because we have another attack on f3. We have intermezzo, and also we have attack on the bishop. So if knight d4, pawn takes, then we have white has another problem on c3. a3, white is trying to attack our bishop, but we're attacking everything here. c3 and c4. So now we take on c3. And also now the threat is to take on b2 with the fork, by the way. Pawn takes, we take the other bishop, bc, and now also very nice move, very, very nice, bishop g4. In case white is taking on g4, there is a problem on c3. So that's why queen has to go to d2, defending the c3 square. And now we're going queen f3, attacking the rook, and also highlighting all the light squares. If rook goes to g1 with potential with something on the g file, we go for f5, opening up the e file against the king, the f file against the f2 pawn, and just creating a huge attack. It's just completely winning for black. That was a bishop c4. In case of g5 here, which is immediately challenging our knight on f6, well, then we're going for knight e8. We're just going back, and we shouldn't be afraid generally of this g4, g5 push if we don't have any h6 pawn there. We shouldn't be afraid of it. So now there is no real threat here. And okay, g5 pawn is on the board, but there is nothing. So knight takes d4, let's say ed, knight e2, we just play bishop c4, defending the pawn, and next move we're ready to go for the c6 and d5, break in the center. We have better development, we have a better position as black. If bishop goes to c4, just putting it on this diagonal, just at some moment to create something, then we go c6 again, very similar idea, targeting either bishop with a b5 or going for the d5 ourselves, removing the bishop to c7 and going for the d5. So in case of h4, in case white is continuing the attack, so to say, we're playing bishop c7 and we're going to play for the d5, breaking the pawn structure in the center for white. But it's not clear what is white doing on the king side, because I think we're going to faster open the e file than the file against the king. Then the white is going to do something on the king side. So if knight takes on d4, then we're going for take, knight e2, challenging the pawn. We're going for bishop c5, typically defending, and now we're going for attack with not attack, but a break in the center with a d5, opening up also the e file here. So that was mostly all about this g4 move. So the other move, which is pretty much logical, because we didn't play h6, we didn't stop bishop g5, so white can go for bishop g5 themselves. The idea is definitely that there is still a pin on the knight, that there is some knight coming to the d4 and so on. So of course we have to do something with the bishop, and we first of all ask the question, where do you want to go? Now it's already different story. So when we play h6 in this position, even though white is not castled, g4, g5 are not the moves, because simply, okay, first of all, bishop has to go somewhere. So let's start what happens if bishop goes all the way back, and maybe white wants to go with a g4 later. Now we go, okay, we could try, of course, knight a5. It's interesting move. The idea is, of course, we want to kick the bishop from b5 and take it. So if d4 happens, we play bishop b4, putting pressure on the e4 pawn. It's also one of the most interesting moves against the d4. In some of the lines, we can go for it, putting more pressure on the pawns. de, knight e4. Now knight c6, knight c3 is a problem. Queen d4, double attack. But now we take bishop c3, pawn takes, and d5, depending the knight. And if pawn takes, then we're going to grab it with the knight. So c4, trying to break our pawn. a6, attacking the bishop. Pawn takes on d5. We take the bishop, queen takes on e4, and we have knight c4 with a very nice square, even though white got this very good center. But after castle, we have rook a4 with all kinds of threats against the queen on the fourth rank, as well as d5 might fall at some moment. These pawns are looking very strong, but in reality they could be weak because it's not so easy to defend, at least not with c pawn and not with e pawn because of this knight. So we might even create some attack against this pawn. So we have definitely a compensation. Knight e7 is another option, probably slightly better to go for knight e7 instead of knight a5. If here h3, then we're going for c6, bishop c4, and bishop c7, and we're following our plan with a d5. If bishop goes to c4 immediately, we go knight g6 now. Now our knight is ready to jump, and okay, generally it's good square, also defending the pawn. After queen d2, we can remove the bishop to b4. Now this knight is pinned, and d4, d5 is actually so much easier to play. We can also support it with c6 in case we want to take on d5 with a pawn, but also d5 straight away could be a move due to the problem on actually, no, sorry, cannot be played because there are too many but yeah, c6 and d5 is the move. Because the problem is after pawn comes here, takes, knight takes, we're not going to be happy because knight could take our queen. So that was the bishop e3. If bishop d2, bishop comes to d2, then we go with a knight d4, again, similar approach. Bishop c4 and now c6. So this is our one of the most typical ideas, going with a knight to d4, c6, bishop c7, and go for d5. So these are like two plans which we have, either rook e8, bishop f8, d6, d5, and so on, or knight d4, c6, bishop c7, d4, d5. Now bishop h4, keeping the bishop on this diagonal. Well, here we're coming to another move which we can play, which is bishop e7. And it feels like that the pawn is now unprotected because white could take on c6 and take the pawn on e5. Well, that's true, but there is some trick. So let's first start with the moves which is not bishop c6, but just other moves like queen e2. So now white wants to castle long and create a threat, create an attack by playing g4, g5. I would like you to stop the video and try to find the best move for black. I think it's not so difficult, since white is saying they want to create this attack on the king side, not saying, but kind of pointing out with the moves. And queen is on e2. The knight e4 comes with a bigger power, because now knight e5 is not possible due to attack on the queen. So knight has to take, pawn takes, bishop takes, knight d5. Now bishop is on e5. Now f5 is the main question, but then we have c6 intermezzo with a fork. If pawn takes, we take the knight, because now queen a5 is a big, big threat, double attack on the king and the bishop. And basically, I don't know actually where to put the bishop, but I think white will have to castle or do something in order to save the bishop. But other than that, actually, bishop could be trapped. Actually, bishop could be trapped after attacking an a6. After queen a5 and a6, bishop could be trapped on b5. And well, this pawn could be a weakness later, so great position for black. And if white goes for castle short quickly, then okay, then we can say that there is no g4, g5 any longer, because now it doesn't make any sense, because white already castled. Now we go for d6, continuing our development, now defending the pawn for sure. And in case bishop takes c6 here, I mean, basically the idea is to immediately strike with d4. Pawn takes and d4. This actually has been a game Abdusattorov against Krasovitsky, and also Petkov against Hovhannisyan. Here in both games, e takes d4 was played, and okay, it was a okay position, slightly worse. Maybe black was fighting for a draw. But here we have knight h5, very nice move. The main point is that we want to trade these bishops, because our bishop is objectively, I mean, honestly speaking, it's bad. So so bishop e7, queen e7, after de, we are taking the bad pawn structure in exchange for a super dangerous counterattack on the king side. Now we have a bishop which is coming to g4, knight to f4, queen is ready to come to f6, g6, rook is coming out. So it's going to be a very, very tough position for white to face, because the pawn structure is important for the endgame, but the king safety can be very tricky. h3, stopping all these ideas with the knight g4 and with the knight bishop and with bishop g4. But now we have an interesting plan. We go for knight h7. Knight h7, the main idea of it is to trade these bishops, again pointing out that the bishop on e7 is not particularly the best one, and later to trade the knight on f3, because after we trade the knights, white is not going to have such a big control over the d4 square. In case bishop takes on c6, we're just taking on h4, bishop goes away, and we go away with the other bishop, and now we're controlling the d4 very well. Bishop g3, removing the bishop, well, then we go for knight g5, threatening to trade the knights. It looks logical to take, and now bishop c6, bc, d4. Feels like white fulfilled their goal, played for the d4 in the position, but now we have bishop a6, developing an attacking move. We have a bishop pair, let's not forget about that. The rook e1, ed, queen d4, and we have queen b8, a typical idea how to include the queen in the game. Later we are b6 or b4, but also for now it's targeting the pawn on b2. So yeah, that's an interesting idea. The position is complicated, of course. We have bishop pair advantage, maybe slight worse pawn structure, even though it's not so much worse since the pawns are holding all together. But yeah, generally for both sides there are pros and cons, and both sides have chances to win. So bishop e7 looks like trading is the best option for white. Knight is taking on e7 with a threat of going to g6. Now d4, white is trying to open up absolutely everything, going with the main idea, d4, attacking the pawn on e5. So now we go with the knight to g6, defending the pawn at the same time. There is no double pawn, no take on c6 any longer. We can take on e5. And we have a great position. We can trade the knights on g5 again. If we want to develop the bishop to e6, basically we don't really have problems. Position is around equal. We shouldn't complain. This was a castle. So now what happens if white is going for the g4? Since it's logical, right? We played h6. Now white is going for g4, g5, trying to break and trying to use this hook. But unfortunately, it's not working at all because, okay, even though it's a pin now, bishop is standing in e7, we're just grabbing the pawn for free. In case of rook g1, we have a d6 move defending our knight on g4, and it's already a winning position for black due to this extra pawn. If bishop e7, knight e7, we're taking with knight, h3, attacking the knight. So now the problem is that this only knight defending the pawn on e5. We have to go back, knight e5. But now we're in time with the d5, using the fact that white is still not castle, still didn't finish development. Now we broke with the d5. We're threatened to take on e5. Also some other threats are in position, developing the bishop from c8. So we're actually getting a much better position here due to our strike in the center. And this attack which was happening is not really working out. In order to castle, by the way, white also has to spend some time bringing the queen to d2 or e2. So it's not really working out the way white was hoping for. Queen d2, the idea of queen d2 is to keep the castle long opportunity and this g4, g5 idea. But it is just a blunder because after knight takes on e4, we are attacking the queen and attacking the bishop at the same time. So after de, we are just grabbing the bishop. And okay, this is the way how white gets back the pawn with knight e5, but now after rook b8, our pieces are just much more active than the whites. We have the bishop pair advantage, and the king is still not sure which side to castle, so definitely we're slightly better as well. So bishop c6 feels like the only way for white to go, the only kind of a question in this line, because we moved back with the bishop to e7. We removed the defense from the e5 pawn. This is the only kind of critical line. We take with the b pawn, knight e5. Now knight e4, very important, attacking on a4 and also having this knight c6 idea. Knight takes on e4, we take on h4, castle, rook b8, and black is just doing very well because we have a bishop pair in this position. Even though, okay, knights are beautiful, but we can play, let's say, bishop b7 and just kick out the knights from the e5 and f5 and e4. So what happens with bishop e7? Well, here the point is, okay, if we are going to go for knight c3, it's not really going to work out in the best way. But we have queen e7, because now we're attacking the knight on e4. And after de, queen e5. We're taking. Again, king is still in the center. White has to do something about it. Castle looks logical, but now rook b8. Since this pawn took on c6, we are having a semi-open file for the rook. And the next moves, we're going to play something like d6. Most likely, we will be able to break the position of the pawn on e4 with the f5, develop the bishop. The pawn we're going to keep for now on c6 because it's perfectly covering everything, but we could also go with it further, and the other pawn could be on c6. But for now, it's ideal position for the pawn because everything is defended. So great position for black, around equal, of course, but with some chances. Knight c6, the threat is to take the queen on e7 because it's actually take with the check. So now we have to take the knight on c6, and now if knight takes on e4, then that's going to lose for white because after f4, after f5, we're going just to win the piece. In case of d takes e4, then we are going for bishop a6, stopping the castling opportunity for white, and after queen d4, rook fd8, we stopped another castling opportunity. So no castle is actually happening, and after f5, we're ready also to enter with the queen to b4, attacking the pawn on b2. So we're just getting a great position and chances as black. Queen e2 is trying to pin our knight to the queen, which looks very logical. But here we have a very strong move. So first of all, if case of queen b4, it's possible, but after queen e4, queen b2, king can defend the knight, and the other rook is defending the rook on a1. So yeah, the structure is better for white here, even though we have a bishop position is not so good for black. So here we have a very strong move, bishop h3. So it's a computer move, of course, but it's creating a big threat. So first, what happens after gh? Well, after gh, we're just having bishop queen b4, and now queen e4 is not a problem due to the rook e8 move. So pawn has to take the knight, but now we take on b2. Now king d2 is already not working due to us bringing the rook to d8. So castle has to happen. We are taking the knight on c3, taking the piece back. We are for surely going to push on the white's king since it's in a worse position. There are weak pawns around the king, and materially speaking, we're fine. We're having the same amount of pawns. But king safety is definitely an issue for white. That's why we are clearly better. If queen takes on e4, immediately we have a strong move, rook queen f6, introducing a threat of rook e8 and winning the queen. So now white has to do something, let's say castle, short, but then it's just a blunder because rook a8, white has to move away the queen. Now queen g6, and we're going to win an exchange because there is no way to stop the checkmate other than g3. If castle long, well, then rook a8 again, queen goes away. Now we can take the pawn on g2, which was defended by the queen. And after rook h1, we can go bishop f3, attacking the rook on d1. We have the semi-open files against the king. We can continue this attack on the b file, and yeah, we're just white is having some pawn structure issues. We as well have some pawn structure issues, but it's going to help us to open up an attack against the king. In case king f1 is played, defending the pawn on g2, then we're going to f8, again, the same move, queen c4, and now bishop f5, just removing the queen. The idea is that even though white didn't castle, the king is stayed in the center, and even though we're down one pawn, we're fine because the king is in the center. It cannot castle. There is still going to be some issue with the rook on h1 for some time. There is definitely a compensation for that. King goes to d1, the other direction, then we go for the rook f to e8. Queen has to go away, but now after queen f3, pawn takes bishop, g2, rook goes away, we trade it, and after rook b8, we're threatening to take the pawn on f3, we're threatening to take a pawn on f3 as well. Also, we have ideas of bringing the rook to the other file to defend, to attack the pawns on the king side. So the position is definitely with some attacking chances and initiative for black. So queen f3 is the most kind of human response to this situation. Then we are having rook f8 with a check. Now king has to go, king d1, queen f3, pawn takes, and bishop g2. Again, we're getting similar endgame. We're going to have rook b8 attacking the pawn on b2 and so on. So we're going to take back the pawn on c3 as well. So we're getting to the endgame with the bishop against the knight, where the bishop is going to be a better piece due to it's going to work on both sides of the board. And generally speaking, because of the exposed king, we might have some attacking opportunities as well. So what happens if pawn takes on e4 instead of the queen? Well, then we're just going to go for the very nice move. Okay, first of all, bishop g2 feels like the natural move, attacking the rook, and also, okay, not really attacking the pawn, but pointing out at the pawn. But after rook g1, the problem is bishop has to go back to h3, and after queen h5, which is attacking both h6 and bishop on h3, we're going just to lose. So that's why we have to play very nice move, bishop queen b4. There is no queen e4 any longer, like in the previous lines. So now queen e3, defending the knight on c3. This was actually happening in the game Wahidov against Havhannisyan. And in this position, of course, we can just take the pawn on g2. The point is that after rook g1, due to all these problems with these pieces and the overloading of the queen, we can take with the bishop on e4. Since white cannot really recapture the bishop because of all the pins, knight cannot recapture because of the pin, and queen takes, we have this, so it's not really working out. And other than that, the bishop can go to b6 just to defend the king on g8. In case of long castle, which feels like a good move, defending also the pawn on b2, we are introducing the attack with a rook b8, immediately threatening some nasty checks and even mates. So bishop is not bishop is hanging, but it cannot be taken yet. Rook d3, attacking the bishop, also introducing the idea of king escaping via the d2 square. But now we bring the bishop all the way back to c8, and it's going to work from the other diagonal. A slightly better position for black for sure, but big attack is ongoing. I would say it's tough for white, very tough. Rook b1 defending the pawn, then we have bishop g2 again, rook g1, and bishop e4, the same idea. The idea is following, of course, the knight cannot take, and if queen takes, then we're going to have the problem. White is going to have a problem with rook e8. If a3 happens, we're going back with the queen, b4, queen e5, knight e4, and now rook f8, putting an enormous amount of pressure. And okay, we also will have something like f5, sorry, if white is defending with f3, so we're just having better position. In case of queen g4, checkmate threat, we have to be careful, of course. Now we go g6. We have to stop it. We cannot go bishop g6, unfortunately, due to the pin. So a3, attacking the queen. Queen goes away. Now queen goes to e5, at the same time attacking the knight on c3. So knight e4 looks like logical, but now we bring the other rook, targeting the knight again, f3. And here, we cannot go for f5, because our problem is the pawn on g6 is hanging here. We have rook e6 defending the pawn, and f5 would be played in the next move. So queen g3, white is trying to remove this attacker. We're taking f5. And next move, we're ready to take the knight back. Finally, we're going to have around equal endgame. Actually, we're most likely going to have some advantage on the king side due to the 2 against 1, but our pawn structure on the queen side will have some issues, so it will be around even endgame. And of course, rook endgame is easier to defend for the side without a pawn. So short castle is another try. Then we're taking on b2, attacking the knight on c3 in case white is taking the bishop on h3, which they're not doing because it would open up the king so badly. So queen c4, attacking and defending at the same time. Now bishop e6 coming back, targeting the queen and asking some questions. Queen c3. In case of queen c2, after knight d5, queen c6, knight e7, king 7, knight 6 is fine position, but it still feels like white is putting more pressure. The knight is very strong piece in this endgame. So here we go rook f d8 first. After knight d5, bishop d5, ed, queen b6, offering a trade of the queens. But now queen goes back, and after c6, after pawn takes, we're ready to bring the rook. And since our rooks are going to be super active, we're threatening to take, and also later we'll put more pressure on the c and a pawns. And this looks like completely equal position, but we will have to defend because, of course, there is an extra pawn for white, and we'll have to try to take it as fast as possible. So that was all the bishop g5 move. Now we're going into the a3 line, into the a3. So a3 looks like the most flexible move in the position. So the idea is, of course, that there is a bishop c4 and bishop a4, a2 always is there. Also, white can castle if they want, or also slowly develop the pieces like bishop g5 or bishop e3, queen, and then deciding to which side to castle. But yeah, very, very flexible move. And here we go, knight d4. This is basically very typical when we're having, in this position, if we go for rook e8 and bishop f8, it would be too passive because white didn't castle yet. Maybe they can try to create something. So we have to be more dynamic. We have to be faster in this position. And we have to go for the knight d4, which is also generally an idea. So if knight takes on d4, pawn takes, knight e2, c6, attacking the bishop. Bishop goes away. Let's say start with a4. Then there is queen a5 check, attacking the bishop, c3, defending the knight, the bishop. dc, knight takes, and b5. b4, counterattack. Queen goes all the way back, bishop d3, and now a5, using the fact that there is the pin on the rook on a1, and which brings already us to a slightly better position out of the opening for black. What happens if bishop goes to c4? Well, then we're going to transpose to the main line from here. So what happens in case of bishop g5? Bishop g5 makes a lot of sense. First of all, pinning our knight to the queen and stopping at some moment our d5 ideas. So here we go for c6, bishop goes away, and our favorite move, of course, asking a question to the bishop on g5, h6, asking if bishop wants to stay on this diagonal or move away. So we go, bishop goes normally to h4, and now we can take on f3, queen takes, and now bishop e7 is the move. Because the problem was earlier, the pawn was under attack on e5, so we couldn't really go for this. So in the next move, we're going to look what happens after the castle. Basically, after the castle, white is just not going for any of the attacks on the queen side, king side, and just castling. Here, for example, if we take on b5, we have to be very careful because it will be a great mistake, since after knight b5, there is knight b5, and we have some issues on e5 or on d6. We are going to spoil our structure very badly and get a losing position. So c6 has to be included first. Now, bishop goes to c4, using the fact that there is this very nice square for the bishop to hide later. We go bishop c7. Now we're already going for the more active plan of the c6 and d5. Was, of course, main idea to break in the center, like we already discussed. In case of h3, which would stop bishop g4 ideas, generally just going to transpose to the bishop a2 line. In case of knight takes d4, we are just grabbing the pawn, and again we are transposing to the knight d4 line. In case of bishop a2, then we have d5, and now the huge threat is to come with the bishop to g4, and now white has to do something about it and playing h3. Of course, now we cannot go for any hooks any longer. We already castled short side. Now bishop is 6. We're just defending the pawn on d5, developing the bishop at the same time. We have a strong center. We're having a slight advantage here. Let's see how the game could continue. Let's say bishop g5. Then we just have queen d7, because now we're not afraid of bishop taking the knight on f6, since after recapturing with a pawn, we're going to have a very nice g file for the attacking opportunities against the king. Knight g5 immediately is another option, questioning our bishop, but here we are not worried. We are playing h6, and we are not afraid to trade the bishop, since the position is not so open as the bishop love it. So bishop pair is not bringing too much of advantage for white, but knight is standing pretty nicely on e6. That was bishop a2. Now we're going for the bishop g5. So first of all, bishop g5 is with the main idea of stopping the d5 move. So here again, as always, we go for h6 first, asking a question to the bishop. Where does it want to go? Bishop goes to h4. Here I would like you to stop the video and try to find the best move for black. So in this position, we're going for knight f3. First of all, we are trading the knights because we cannot really play g5 now, since then there would be knight g5 moves. So knight has to take. His pawn takes, we have g5, and we kind of blocked fully the position. We play d6, defending everything. We're already having much better pawn structure, and the bishop on g3 is just pretty much stuck forever. So queen takes f3 is another option, definitely better. Now we go for g5, bishop g3, and now we go for d5. And here we're just winning material because the queen cannot really be going to the better square. Since after take, we have intermezzo move, bishop g4, attacking the queen. The only way is to go for a queen to e3. And after take on d4, on d5, d4 is coming with a fork, and we're going to win there. That was the castle. So in case bishop goes to c4, immediately removing the bishop, so not coming under the tempos, we go for c6 as our main move. We're just continuing our ambitious plan, going for bishop c7, then going forward with a d5. In case white castles, bishop c7, we're just going to transpose to the 7th move castle lines. And then in case of g4, white is still trying to create this attack against our king side. Well, but it's unfortunately not working. I mean, for us it's fortunately, but for white, because we can simply take in this case, because now the pawn is not defended. And in case white is going for a3, we just play queen f6. And there is a huge problem, since knight cannot take on d4, it would be checkmate. Other than that, we are ready to take on f3. In case of knight takes on d4, which is at the same time attacking the knight on d5, we are taking, we're playing queen h4, intermediate move, threatening the checkmate on f2 and defending the knight at the same time. Queen f3, defending the pawn, and now we're taking on d4 and attacking the knight on c3 as well. And after knight e2, after knight c5, after knight e5, we're going to spoil the structure by taking the bishop. We're just going to have a bishop pair, and at the same time, we're going to have still an extra pawn and brilliant position to win. Bishop goes back to a2. Now we go with bishop to c7. In case of h3, we have knight e6, which would transpose to h3, bishop c7 lines. Now bishop e3 is another move, attacking our knight. But again, we're having this very nice e6 square for the knight. And the next move, we are ready to strike the center with the pawn d5. For example, after h3, d5, and we have already fulfilled all the tasks of the opening, and white still has a lot to do. In case of a3, what would stop the idea of bishop g4 makes a lot of sense. We play bishop c7. Now d5 is a threat. Bishop goes away from the tempo of d5 on a2, makes also sense. Now the point is that we could have gone for d5, but after ed, cd, let's first look at cd, because after cd, bishop g5 would put a lot of pressure on our pawn on d5 and our pieces with a pinning the knight. So that's why we cannot really do it. But knight d5 would be still good for black, but still our main line is better, because here after knight d5, cd, knight e4, knight ed4, castle, queen d6, we have a great position. We have great attacking opportunities, but still we're having some pawn structure problems. Okay, bishop on a2 is out of the game for a time. Position, we're having attack here, but we don't have to rush with d5. We can play knight e6 first and then going for the d5. The main idea of the knight e6 is not to allow white to have the opportunity of taking the knight on d4 at some moment and doubling the pawns on d4. So castle, and now rook e8, we're just slowly preparing, rook e1, h6. Now we are ready to bring the knight to g6. Generally, we want to go, of course, for the break in the center of the d5, and we are just slowly preparing it. So in case of bishop g5, immediately putting the knight and pinning, putting the bishop and pinning our knight so that d5 potentially is not working out. Always we want to try to ask the question to the bishop, h6, where do you want to go? Do you want to go back or to h4? In case bishop is 3, then we're going to actually transpose, because after bishop c5, which is a very great move, we're going after knight e5, d5, we'll transpose the bishop is3 move, which we'll discuss in a moment. Case of bishop h4, staying on this diagonal, keeping the pin, we're having very nice move, knight takes f3. In case of bishop c7 here, there is, bishop c7 is also possible. The problem is here that after some takes, the lines are getting a bit more messy and more complicated. Of course, it's a computer move, but not always we have to go for the computer moves. And in this particular case, it probably would be too messy for us to handle. So knight d4 takes knight e2 with d5. We are striking. That's our main idea. ed, we take back with the pawn. Bishop takes. We're losing a pawn. Queen d6, bishop f3, rook e8. This position is actually absolutely great because king is staying in the center. There is no castle opportunity because of the checkmate on h2. King is, for now, is there. The pieces are pinned. We have more active pieces. The bishop pair, a good price for the pawn, but there are also other moves for white which are a bit more tricky. g4 is not working out here because after d5, g5, we have bishop g4 attacking the knight on f3, attacking the bishop on c4, so it's not really working out. Absolutely lost for white. So h3 is a strong move here because after g5, knight takes on g5, we have d5 intermezzo, ed, knight e5, queen h5, and actually this position we are winning. Looks a bit messy, but we're actually winning here. In case of bishop goes to g3, which would be the best try for white, we go for d5, our main break in the center. Bishop a2. Here we have rook e8 as well, but we can also take on f3. Bishop queen takes d4, attacking the knight. Here knight goes back to b1, and bishop e6 would be a bad move because first of all, okay, in the first glance it looks like a good one because we're opening the file for the rook, attacking the queen. But the problem is after bishop takes fe, knight e2, there are no real jumps for the knight, and after knight coming to c4, there will be a problem on e5 pawn. So queen e7, we're rather preparing it like this, knight e2, king g7, just making some improving moves, a5, h4, going for g4, and after h5, the position is remaining like a bit unclear. So I would prefer to go for the more simpler and easier option with knight takes on f3. Knight f3, in case of gf, white is opening the g file. We cannot really go for g5 anymore. Now we are ready to go for our other plan, bishop e7, to break the pin. Now if rook g8, rook g1 is happening, we move away the king. In the next moves, we are ready to trade the bishops on e7 and then march with the pawns on the queen side with a b5, a5. We'll not have issues on the g file because king is not there anymore. We can always defend it, so it's just a good position for black. So if queen takes on f3, we have bishop e7 again. The main idea is defending on f6 and preparing to go for d6 or d5 later. Case of h3, we go d6. We cannot yet push d5. It's all blockaded. g4, white wants to attack. White wants to create a hook. So here we have to be careful. We go for bishop e6. But g5 is not really working because we just removed the knight. The idea that the bishop is actually hanging on h4. So we can always take the pawn on g5 and just win the game. Bishop goes back to a2 with not to create any tempos with a d5. We go d6. Queen goes back to e2 because the bishop coming to g4 was a threat, and now bishop e6. We are ready to prepare for the d5. Of course, for some time we have to prepare it fully since e5 would be hanging. And yeah, just having around equal position, not much to say. In case of castle, long castle, then we're going for the d6, similar idea like before. We're ready to go forward with a b5, a5, b4 attack against the king. White will start creating attack against against black on the king side as well. So we have to be careful about that. But our main idea, of course, is to create attack against the king on the queen side. That was bishop g5. Now we go to the bishop e3 line. Very interesting one. We sacrifice the pawn here. We go for bishop c5. Very strong move. But the pawn is sacrificing not forever, but temporarily. Because after knight e5, we go d5. Now, if bishop goes back to a2, we have queen e7 pointing out that knight on e5 and pawn on e4 are in danger. So if knight goes back to a3, we just trade. And the problem is that after d4, white is going to lose the piece. Case of f4, then white is on this one hand defending the knight, but also removes defense from bishop from e3. So here we can go for knight c2, queen c2, and take the bishop. At the next move, we're already threatening to take the pawn on f4, and the knight is very loose on e5. So knight a4, trying to kick the bishop from a4, but here we have knight c2 again, because it's coming with a check, and knight on e5 is still hanging, since after queen c2, bishop takes. If fe, we have queen e5. If knight c6, which is a bit trickier version, because black is losing a pawn on c6 on the way bc, pawn takes on c3, and knight g4. We're attacking e6, e3 pawn, e4 pawn. Our king is in safety in comparison to the white's colleague. And, well, we're just having good positions, and white is having super many weaknesses. So better position for black. In case of knight a4, immediately it's actually a computer defense, and it's also been played in the games, but not OTB, only in correspondence, because it's pretty difficult. Since after queen a5, it feels like, oh, it's getting very, very unclear here. But after c3, knight c2, we have to play this move, knight c2 takes. We take on e3. Now we take on c4 and attacking on knight on e5 at the same time. Also at some moment b5 is a threat. Now if white takes on c4, we have super strong move queen to g5, introducing the move b5, which is going to win the knight. There is no way for knight to jump. So d4 is very strong. It's important to know this move if white is playing this line, because now there is also a square on c5 for the other knight. And now we go for b6, so we stop the knight coming to c5 idea. Knight c6, we're sacrificing a pawn. Now after queen g5, we're again attacking another pawn. So knight e7 with a check, king h8, white is taking on c8. We are down the 2 pawns, but we're up at full development. Our pieces are super active. White's king is still in the center. So how the game could continue is, of course, something like e5. Then we jump with the knight forward to g4, attacking the pawn on e3. Castle happens, long castle, and after f6, we are breaking this chain. White has to take on f6 not to spoil the structure. Rook takes. Now we have super concrete threats of knight f2, rook f2. So rook df1, we are fighting for the f-file as well. Rook trade happens, queen e4, and now after h6, we are not worried about any checkmates. Knight is out of the game on a4. We have a huge compensation for all the pawns. Our pieces are super active, so position is slightly better for black. So that was a bishop e3 move. Now we're going into the main line, which is knight takes on d4 immediately. We might transpose here from some other line. So here we take, of course, and now knight e2. So knight is attacking the pawn, and now it's a big question what to do with it. So there is, of course, move like bishop c5, which would try to defend the pawn, but there is much better move, bishop c7. We are sacrificing a pawn. We're letting white take it because it's just absolutely fine. If white is taking it, looking at our development and looking at white's development, we can see the difference. So in case white is taken immediately, d5 is, of course, a huge strike. We're getting compensation for the pawn. ed happens, bishop g5 with a tempo on the queen. In case knight goes back, then we have rook e8. There is no other way for white than king f1, since after bishop e3, we're just taking on d5, and we're going to win 2 pieces for the rook. So king f1 is forced. Now c takes on d5, attacking the bishop. Bishop has to go all the way back. Queen d7. We're having absolutely active position with all the pieces out in the game, with all the pins, all the tactical ideas. White has issues with the king. The rook is on h1, not developed. The bishop on c1 is still a question, and bishop on a2 is a problem. So it's not really working so well. So now f3, kind of defensive and offensive move at the same time. But now we have again rook e8 with a check. The only way to stop it, to block it, is with a knight coming to e2. But now after cd, we're threatening to take on the bishop on c4. And if bishop is attacking our rook, we have bishop d7 returning it, queen takes, castle happens, and now d4. We have more space in the position. Our pieces are more active. We are ready at some moment to push for h5, h4, attacking the queen, the king. The pawn on c2 also could be a weakness with moves like rook c8 and targeting it. Knight could come to e3 even with moves like knight d5. And due to the pawn on d5, we have d4. We have so much space and so many more opportunities. So we have a great position as black. So in case of the castle, we go for d5 as well. Pawn takes on d5. We take with the knight now. We're completely fine, because if white goes, let's say, on g3, trying to be more defensive, we go bishop e6, queen s3, queen d7, h3, f5. We have absolutely great position. Due to the pawn structure on the queen side with a pawn on d4, we have absolutely, I would say, better position, because next move we're ready to go for b5, c5. We will expand on the queen side. We'll have better position there. Meanwhile, we have to be careful about our king, but everything looks safe so far on the king side. So knight takes on d4. White has to try out. Has to try to test, but bishop h2 is winning the pawn back instantly, since our king takes. There is a queen h4 targeting both the king and the knight on d4. We're grabbing the knight on d4, and the next move we're going to develop the bishop to e6. Knight will go to b5, targeting the bishop of white, bringing the rook out to e8, and so on. So position is around balance, so we gave up the d pawn for the h pawn, which could make the white's king a bit weaker than ours. Bishop g5 is another move, aiming it against the d5 move. Since now white is pinning our knight, it cannot support the pawn on d4. So we have to do something. We have to do, first of all, h6 is our first question to the bishop, which we're always doing after bishop g5. If bishop takes an f6, we grab with a queen, and now we're already defending the pawn on d4. Castle, now d5. We don't have actually to do it. We don't have to give up a pawn, but it's actually very nice and it's working out. Pawn takes, pawn takes. If bishop d5, queen d6, already white is losing. And if bishop goes back, okay, we have such kind of bad pawn structure, but after playing a5, and looking at our pieces, bishop pair, all potential rook activity, like coming with rook to the 6th rank to attack the king on the king side, bringing the other rook to d8, and so on. Beautiful bishops, so we have definitely decent chances, and we're actually much better. Bishop comes to h4, trying to keep the pin on the knight. Then we're going for d5 here anyway. Bishop goes to a2, we're grabbing on e4 and playing c5, creating such a nice pawn structure. We have super nice position, and for example, ideas of f4 with e5 could be met by very nice and strong move g5. Since after take, we're playing knight g4 with the idea of aiming for the e4 square, using the fact that bishop on h4 is not defended. We're going to grab a pawn on g5. Also, knight is coming to e3. Position is already clearly better for black. If pawn takes on d5, we take cd. So now if bishop goes back to a2, we bring rook out, targeting the knight and pinning it to the king. So now queen d2. White wants to castle, but long side. But here we have queen to e7, attacking the knight. And now white cannot actually castle. Most likely we'll have to play something like king f1, bring in the rook to e1, and so on. But it's going to be definitely tough for white. If bishop takes on f6, trying to win the pawn, queen takes f6, bishop d5, and again, we're getting position where we sacrifice the pawn. We have bishop pair. We have super nice pieces. We are ready to play rook e8, and king of white is still in the center. We have many tactical ideas also in the position. Pawn on d4 is great because it's just we're just having so much space due to this pawn. So yeah, definitely a compensation for black here, but I would say even some winning opportunities as well, since position is very imbalanced here. So that was all about this chapter today. Now we're going to go through the main and key ideas and moves in the chapter, and let's start with this position where white just played d4 move. So here after d4, we have to be pretty happy since our bishop from d6 was pretty sad piece. Now it's becoming pretty happy one because we're just taking on d4 and we're just playing queen e7 and our bishop is working, ready to go for the e5, for the c5. So just a great piece, and we just have to remember that. In case bishop takes on c6, again, white is making our life easier now. We would generally aim for taking with the b pawn, since we would aim for taking towards the center. But in this particular case, in this chapter, I would say, and when the bishop is on d6, of course, we take with a d pawn so that we have opportunities to develop the bishop out. Since due to the bishop on d6, it could be more difficult, but of course, we know in our lines that we're making it later. The other position happens when white is going for castle and playing h3. So if we haven't castled yet, if white is going for h3, stopping our g4 move, and castles, then we can do it like a mathematical, formula. This plus this, a plus b plus c equals that we go for long side and creating a g5, g4 attacking hook on the king, and we are going to continue and proceed with attack. This was this position. Okay, next position is when white is waiting with a castle. Both sides are waiting with a castle. No one wants to show where they want to castle. We are waiting. And here in this position, where white played a3, we cannot yet castle, even though it feels like that pawn on a7 could be poisoned one, but it's going to complicate position. So first we play a6. Now both sides hate a6, but if you compare white and black, so white has the knight and the pawn, which is easier to hook, and also knight and pawn here, which is easier to hook. Meanwhile, we don't have these knights any longer, so it's not so easy to hook anymore, black. So we can actually castle one of the sides, and we will see later how we'll react on that. And here, if white is just keeping pressure, still not showing where they castle, we can castle long, because after castle, there is a tactical idea which is working out. And in case of long castle, then we can go for b5 and castle short, meanwhile attacking the white's king on the queen side. The next position is when white played the d3 move. The next move is, of course, bishop coming to g5, and we want to stop it. We were a bit like, if we're going to go with a rook e8, bishop f8, it's good, but we have to address the issue right now, and we are addressing it by playing h6, stopping the bishop g5, and now bishop cannot get there. Next position is when the bishop came to e3. Now we're continuing our development with a bishop coming to e6 and getting ready for the d5. This is actually the next position where white is taking on e6. And now it's a question for us what actually to do in this position. What do we do here? And again, we're going to have following approach. First of all, it's more ambitious to take with the rook. It's just generally, like, if we can take with the rook, we take it. And in the other cases, we just take with the f-pawn. Now, more detail. What does it mean to be more ambitious? It's when white cannot go immediately for knight d5, c4, d4. So when white is not so fast with all these moves, then we could go for rook e6. But in this particular case, As you can see, white is going with knight e5, c4, d5, stopping our d5 idea, going for d4 themselves. So we cannot go for rook e6 because it's going to be an issue. But we go to f for f takes e6. Very important, very strong. More solid than rook e6, less ambitious, but we're stopping all the opportunities from white. Next position, yes, I love it. When white is going for the g4, so early, yes, it's trying to go for the g4, g5, and so on. But here we have a very strong move, knight d4. Generally, that's how we react to the g4 ideas, especially when they're so early and they are not actually working. So now we're attacking the bishop on b5 and also knight on c3. The main idea is here, of course, that we are having all the tactical approaches later in the position. Like, for example, after g5, which is we can remove the knight back, then there is going to be always nothing against the king because our king is safe. We didn't create any weaknesses, so we shouldn't be worried about this g5 break. But white, on the other hand, will have some issues in the position. So next position, when bishop comes to g5 with this d3 move, then here generally we always want to ask white the question, where do you want to go? Generally, it's always good. In this case, it might be a bit tricky because white hasn't castled yet, but we shouldn't worry since after bishop comes to h4, we have a bishop e7. Bishop e7, and then this g4 is not an issue anymore. We are ready to trade the bishops, so we shouldn't be worried about this this march of the pawn. Next position is when white is castling and going for this h3, stopping our bishop coming to g4. Yes, so here we're going for a very interesting idea. Here's the question, what should we do? How can we do it? We cannot go for d5, we cannot do this, we cannot do that. But what we can do is we can try to trade the bishops and trade the knight on f3 because we're going to get the d4 square. We just want to remove the defender of d4 square. So this is one of the very nice ideas from the chapter. The other position happens when white is going for a3. So first of all, of course, white wants to have an opportunity for bishop to stay on a2, so that bishop is not getting trapped here in any way. And yeah, basically here we're having this very nice idea because we can be more ambitious since white spent all this time of playing a3 and d3. We can be more ambitious and play knight d4. And now we go for a different plan of c6, bishop c7, and d5. So mainly just to remember that we have one of the ideas, rook e8. So one of the ideas, just I'm going to highlight it. So rook e8, so probably in this position better, rook e8, bishop f8, and then d6, d5, and then we will see all the rest of the moves. Then the second idea is when there is some issue on the file, we want to break the pin, we go for bishop e7, stopping breaking the pin. Bishop e7, then d6, and then again we will see. It is going to depend. And the other idea is this knight d4, it's the most ambitious one, c6 and bishop c7. It just all depends on how fast white is and how fast white is reacting. So here knight d4 we are going for, and with the idea of this c6 and bishop c7, which is of course very, very nice. And that was actually the last position which we had for today. I hope you learned something, and I wish you a good day and see you in the next chapter. Bye bye.